Thank you.
Sorry. How come you're not? Okay, you are on the air, so to speak. All right, you're good, you're recording. You got 3 hours and 4 minutes.
Do the best. Let's hope that takes 1:50.
All right.
Have a good night's sleep.
See you guys.
My mother is in surgery right now, which is why
Camera's
I'm
on.
turning my phone off.
Okay.
If it rings, I have to take it.
Yes. Do I open the meeting? Do I have a motion? Motion. It's just budget, we don't have to do that, so. Okay. Our first budget meeting of the season for 2014. Our treasurer, Emma Greta, is gonna make a presentation to the board. And then we're going to have all the departments come in at the future meetings to present their budgets. And obviously then we'll review them all and we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay. All right, Mayor, thank you. Village trustees, Mr. Brown is not going to be here today.
I don't think so.
Okay, I have a packet for him. I'll put it in this box.
Thank you.
I just quickly want to talk about the packet, and then we'll go into the discussion items that we want to go over today. My main goal for tonight is an overview. We have some new trustees that this process is new to. We have some previous board members that have a process that they're used to. What I feel is most important is the process we're going to use is the one that gives that's been given by the Office of State Comptroller and the guidance that they give to villages and towns as to how to do their budget process. So I'm hoping that most of it is similar to previous years, so there's not a learning curve, but there are certain things that the state likes the villages and towns to do, and we're going to try to stay with that as much as possible. There are some modifications that we'll make for, let's say, local reasons or local issues, but for the most part, we'll try to stay within that structure. So in the packet that I gave to all board members, obviously our first page is what we're going to be doing tonight. Second is understanding the budget process. I'm going to go through and highlight a couple things that I feel are important in there. And I would ask if all trustees and there, if you guys can maybe read this to the best that you can by Monday, so that you're familiar with where I'm going to be going with the process. Then there's a email that came from GFOA, Finance Officers Association, that talks about the governor's policy in the new proposed budget, which is going to be an extremely important thing that we have to factor in our consideration. And just to let you know, on Monday's training up at, down in New York, one of the classes discussed the budget. One of the budget directors from the state came down to give out policy and then take questions and answers. And I was getting concerned that the supervisors and mayors that were in the room were ready to storm the podium because they felt like they were getting information shoved down their throats without really a lot of communication as to how this is going to impact the villages and towns. And I empathize with them because it's a difficult prospect. So we'll talk about some of that in detail. Next thing is a copy of the current budget right now that I want to go through on some line items, some imperatives that I have that I'd like to have discussed because I need direction from this board. I'm very fiscal conservative, so I'm going to be on the side of as much spending reductions as possible, but that might not necessarily be the majority of the board's position. So I need guidance from the board as to how we're going to structure discussions on certain things and what's imperative and what is, let's say, less imperative for the process. And then finally, the spreadsheet that I put together that's going to be used is a little bit different from the spreadsheet that's been done previously. I have an example that will be populated in the coming meetings. But what I'm trying to do is just clean it up a little bit, and it will have pretty much all the pertinent information that you're going to need, but it's just got a little bit different format. My goal for next year, if possible, and I'll just pass that around to take a look at. My goal for next year is to utilize a KBS system for budgeting. The village pays thousands of dollars for KBS software and support. They have a budget module that is, from the surface, seems pretty good. I talked to some of my colleagues in other communities who use KBS, and they like the KBS module. It fulfills pretty much everything that the state's looking for, but what it will do is instead of taking this spreadsheet and then inputting it into KBS at the beginning of the fiscal year, it will automatically populate all of our codes and all of our information in KBS, so we don't have to do that double work. So going forward, we're going to be using this format. Again, I took the lines out, I took some other stuff out that I thought were just kind of noise, and a lot of the codes and information are there, and we'll be talking about that in subsequent meetings. Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
How many of the departments have turned in?
Pretty much, I'd say a majority of them have. There's one that will be meeting with me to follow up on some items.
Right.
I expect by the time they're all due for their meetings that most of their data will be in. Again, some of their data they don't really have information on. That's going to be gleaned from myself, working with the village clerk, working with some of our vendors like our insurance company, our EFS and our PFRS information. We get estimates. So a lot of that information will come from other sources. But as far as the department heads themselves, they put some initial submittals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that process as we go along. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to open up the OSC guidance for understanding the budget process. And what I want to highlight here is number one, I think it's a very concise guide as to what we're looking to be doing here. Sometimes the budget process comes across as paint drying on a wall and can get quite arduous and boring, but it's a really important task. It's probably one of the most important tasks, other than making sure that you're spending your money properly, that we can have. Page 2 talks about who is responsible. The main takeaway from here is that the budget process is a process that all interested parties are going to participate in. One of the things I did this year with the department heads is that I asked them, instead of me pushing to them last year's data and saying, okay, do this, because typically what will happen is you push last year's data, they'll put 5% on top of it, and it'll come back to us. We could do that in a day or two and then get ready to input the budget and then hope for the best. So there was an effort to get a lot of thought process from the department heads who know the best uses of the funding in their departments. I can't tell the sewer supervisor what's the best use of certain money when it comes to chemicals. Neither can anybody on the board. So the department heads were challenged with developing their numbers and backing them up. I did get the numbers from most of them. I didn't get backup. When they come to the meetings, they should have backup, and I encourage the board to ask questions about their support of their numbers and their financials. Okay?
I just want to make a note when you brought up the chemicals in particular. I don't want to see any budgets from any of the 3 department heads without knowing that they've gone to West Point to at least find out about chemicals, salt, and everything else. I can't go with their, well, I don't think it's any good. No. So if, for those liaisons, make sure you touch base with your department head. They must go to West Point and have any other, obviously state is already there, but they must go there. They've reached out to us. They said, come and you're welcome to what we get our salt, chemicals, and everything else at. We have to at least reach out before the budget process, because that could change the numbers.
You're talking about buying bulk.
Buying with West Point.
Yeah.
At least so we have the idea, because you know what, it'll end up, now it's gonna be 6 months down the road, a year down the road, now 3 years later, and we've lost thousands of dollars because we never asked the question. Apologize, go ahead.
Okay, so the responsibility largely falls on this group. The budget officer, myself, is the compiler. Okay, my role is to take all the information that's inputted to me and put it into a document that balances out between revenues and expenditures or appropriations. But I also wear a second hat, and that is as a chief fiscal officer. So I'm going to be making recommendations to the board of things that I feel are imperatives. During this process today, I'm going to ask the board to weigh in on what the board has as far as imperatives, because as the compiler, I need input also. There's a lot of things in the budget that need guidance and attention to, okay? From priorities to how we're spending money in certain areas, to holes that we have in the current budget that we know we have to fund in the new budget. Okay, I mentioned one of them before, tax certiorari. Okay, we have to expect that we're gonna have tax certiorari obligations, okay, with the certs that are going on now. We have to fund it, okay? This year we didn't fund it, we're using contingency funds. Another thing I had talked about was overtime, and maybe looking at overtime in a different way, in the overtime pool system that gives the board a lot more discretion as to the spending of overtime funds. The village last year spent approximately $225,000 on overtime. That's a lot of money. Okay, now, a lot of it is justifiable, and I'm sure the department heads can justify their use of overtime, but I think some of it, after Mayor, you and the board made a decision to curtail overtime over the last couple weeks, we're finding that there is definitely some fluidity in our use of overtime, and the fact that I don't believe there's any lower levels of service in the last couple weeks, and yet we have seen an appreciable improvement in the use of overtime. So that's going to be an important discussion as to how we want to structure the budget as far as overtime. Do we want to leave it as is where the salary lines include overtime? Or do we want to set separate pools that in the A fund, the F fund, the G fund, we have an overtime pool that pays for that overtime, but as a trustee, myself, we can go right into that code to see its activity and see its trending and be able to have more oversight as to how money is being spent, okay? So those are just a couple things that I think we're gonna have to glean and have direction on when we construct this.
Are the department heads giving you multi-year capital plans, you know, for expenditures, major equipment?
There are some requests. I wouldn't consider it major equipment, a truck, or as far as capital projects, not really. We don't have a long-term capital plan. The village doesn't have one. I spoke with Noah Nadelson, who's Munistat Services. They're kind of our guide for our bond rating and our ability to borrow money and so on. And he had mentioned that he would be glad to work with the board to develop this 5-year plan. He does have mixed results on it, but the ultimate decider, I think, is the state in their audit last year stated that the village needed a capital plan. And I think that that's something that going forward in the new year, it's going to be a requirement, I would say. You know, state's asking about it, and we do have some resources to help develop that.
Several of the department heads have said, we have a 5-year plan, but we've been asking for it, and that's something, again, each liaison is gonna have to pursue them. We had asked for it to be here, and then the whole thing needs to be put together. It's not 5 different 5-year plans. We've gotta mesh them together for a village 5-year plan. So we've gotta push, the actual documents have not been in this building for a long time, and they need to be.
Absolutely. So with the preparation of this document, obviously, I'm asking for inputs from all the areas, including the trustees. Each of you have certain departments that you are responsible for. I'm hoping that your department heads are speaking with you in their preparations so that they're getting guidance from you as to what they're structuring in their budgets.
Well, I apologize. Gina, could you make sure the department heads get a note to bring whatever whether it's a book, whatever they have, their multi-year documentation to the next department head meeting. This way, we get a look at it at least to see what kind of, where we're at, and now where we need to go. We can give them direction of, this is not good, this is what you need to do. And then we'll get a template for them to help them put together the proper one, and then we can, once we have better information, I mean, I don't wanna sit down with Noah with no information. I apologize for keep interrupting.
No.
I don't wanna forget these
This
things.
is an interactive discussion,
Okay.
Mayor.
But I wanna make sure we have more information to give Noah, if he's gonna sit down and help us put this together the right way. I don't wanna, instead of 2 hours, I don't wanna make it 20. So if we can get as much information put together ourselves, sit down and do it right, and that way the whole village knows which way we're going.
Okay, that's not great. Okay, so we go to page 4, budget preparation process, and it lists some key process items that we should be following. I will note that item 2 I did modify. I modified it because I wanted to turn the budget process into a push process, not a pull process. Previously, the numbers were basically pulled out and just put on the paper. Here, we want to push the responsibility to the people that are most knowledgeable of the spending of their departments and have them give to us justification as to how they're spending money, okay? It seems so far, with the information that I've received, it seems to be working in the right direction. I can't, until we start plugging in the numbers and get the backing, okay, and the support of everything that the department heads are putting forward, I won't assuredly say that we're completely on task there. But right now, my sense is that we're in the right direction.
Right, I think this is very important because a lot of times, even as we said before, we'll just put the numbers from last year and we'll put it forward, tweak it a little bit, 5%. I truly believe that for any new department heads, and even those that have been there 10, 15 years, that and my feeling is that they don't feel the numbers and that area is really similar to the engineering and whatnot, how we're saying Todd was handling a lot of things, and we're pushing that more on the department heads now. I think by doing a push instead of a pull, that they're gonna actually look at their numbers a little bit more, because we're expecting, we're expecting more out of them. And and you gave us this number of $20,000, but yet you only spent 10.
How'd you come
Why
up
the,
with that?
why the other 20? Well, that's what we did for the last 10 years.
And there'll be some variables too, because
Exactly.
the plants and the water plant, sewer plant have been updated. So budgets for maintenance and repairs may start to wane somewhat because of the fact that everything is pretty much been upgraded. So there's gonna be some changes, there may be money shuffled around for other things, but they'll operate pretty good at this point in time because we have a lot of stuff that maybe we don't have in the maintenance end of it.
Exactly.
So those numbers will have to be adjusted, and they'll really have to, if it says $10,000, they'll have to come up with what actually the expense is for that particular task, whether it be maintenance or.
Absolutely. My recommendation with my experiences is that if you want to have more oversight and control of your spending, utilizing contingency accounts or reserve funds are the way to go. Because then that has to pass through your view, okay? And it's not out of sight, out of mind. One of the things that hit home with the overtime situation is that before it was really being examined at the board level, it was really unknown. Okay, now, there are some members that are involved in that know it, but at the decision-making level, you might not know the amount of spending that's going into overtime. Again, there's a good rule of thumb with overtime that if you're having to spend 10, 15% extra on overtime, you're probably short employees, okay? Maybe whether it's a part-timer or a full-timer, all right? I guess the biggest takeaway is overtime and salary are not the same animal. Salary is something that's agreed to, it's determined to be what is reasonable compensation for the work. Overtime is not looked at that way, or it shouldn't be looked at that way. It's not part of your pay. It's an additional pay if the necessity arises. And I think that that's going to be a big thing that I would ask the board to very much consider is that not necessarily blaming anybody about anything, because culture is what it is, okay? If overtime's available and you use it, You can't blame anybody for using it.
We all understand it now because you attached a dollar figure to it,
You got it,
you know, and now we realize that there is an issue and we'll address it.
absolutely. Okay, so, then we get into page 6 and 7, just quickly covers some of the key costs that we're gonna be facing. Employee salaries, compensation for employees is gonna be your highest cost factor. Okay, it's the one that's most, in most budgets, the most expensive or the most, largest chunk of your budget. Debt service is a decent size of our budget also, so we're gonna factor in our debt schedules, our bans. We have, I spoke with our, with Noah about trying to consolidate our bans to one date when they are due, preferably at the end of the fiscal year, so that we're not constantly chasing 5 different dates paying off bans. The other thing we can do with that is sometimes if we can consolidate any of that, we can get better financing too. Okay, there are certain laws that restrict how we can do certain things, and we'll certainly face those as we do, but there are some economies of scale that we'll be able to build up when it comes to that. And at some point, if we don't think we can pay for it in 5 years, we turn it into a serial bond. So debt service is going to be something that is also going to play a large role. Okay, so I'm not going to go very much more into this document, but this document does talk about a lot of the other areas that we're going to be dealing with, okay, as far as costs, budget, revenues, expenses. So what I ask is that you at minimum skim through this so that when we're going through the process, things become a little clear. I think it's a very nice little document. It's pretty concise. Even, you know, if somebody in the public who isn't fiscally oriented read it, they would pretty much, I think, be able to pick up on most of the items and have a decent sense of what's going on. Finally, page 21 are the dates. And because we're a budget calendar, June 1st to May 31st, the dates of when things are due and when the public hearing should be, timeframes and so on, they're all listed there for your reading. Okay? Finally, there's appendices on the back if you have any questions. And there's plenty of information as far as online availability. So if you have any specific budget questions and you have some time on your hands and you want to get an answer without waiting for the budget meeting, there's good resources there. Okay, any questions on the budget document? Okay.
We'll make some of these available downstairs for those that do want to, 1 or 2, if we get anyone to come in, because more people informed, better off we're going to be there.
Okay, all right, I put out a schedule, I believe I emailed it to everybody. I believe the paper, Mary Jane, you'll be posting it?
We did it on the front page.
Okay, so that's gonna be available for any resident who wants to be involved. I did touch on item 2 already, budget officer's role, treasurer's role. Again, budget officer, I'm gonna be the compiler. When I'm asked to weigh in as far as financially, I'm gonna put my treasurer's hat on and I'll make a recommendation, and then I'll ask for the board to either go with it or some hybrid of it or some other decision if that's what you choose. Item 3, governor's policy proposals and impact on village budgeting. I gave everybody an email that came from GFOA. I'm going to highlight what we're facing and what we have to do related to the property tax freeze program. The key issues here are, the general consensus of this is going to make villages and towns somewhat handicapped as far as being able to raise the necessary revenue via tax money to be able to pay for government operations. It doesn't preclude the villages, including our village, from finding revenue sources outside of our taxpayers, okay? Better job at our collection and our meters, better job at our fines and our prosecutorial work that gets done, which the village made a decision recently to have a prosecutor that I believe has a proven record of being able to prosecute in a very fair way with revenue coming in from those prosecutions. So there are fees and so on that the village board can establish during a year. There was some discussion about certain areas that probably should be given fees. Some of them might be a little more controversial. I'm not going to get involved in the politics of it, but I think the best rule of thumb when it comes to fees is, if there's enough municipalities around that are doing a similar activity for expenditure of resources, then there probably should be a reasonable fee attached to it. I do believe, looking at some of the services that the village does, there's quite a bit of individualized services that I believe probably should be paid on an individual basis. Instead, they're being collectively paid by the taxpayer. Now, recently escrows were being put in so that the cost of the engineers are being passed on to the applicants. That's a very good start, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities to take a look at your fee structure and make sure it's updated to the costs today and not necessarily what the costs were 10, 15, 20 years ago. The tax cap freeze program is going to apply to homeowners with incomes of $500,000 or less. The goal of this program is essentially to encourage towns, villages to stay within the 2% tax cap guideline. If it stays within the 2% tax cap guideline, the state will provide funding to make up the difference, okay, of what the increased rate would be versus what the homeowner would have to pay. What's become controversial about it is that it's supposed to be in the form of a rebate back to the homeowner, okay? Now, this is, according to the budget director, this hasn't been set in stone and they're still tweaking it, but in essence, what it does is, it says here, in year one, the state will provide tax rebates to homeowners with qualifying incomes of $500,000 or less who live in a jurisdiction that stays within the 2% tax cap. So what it's doing is that if the village doesn't stay within the 2%, and we go, let's say, to 2.5%, homeowners will not be eligible for that rebate. They calculated that the average rebate is going to be somewhere around $500. That's significant, and that's a very difficult prospect for your budget, because now it's very difficult to go over 2% and have to tell residents that they're not going to be getting the state rebate. So that might be okay for communities that have a lot of opportunity to become efficient. But if you're a community that's quite efficient with your budget, you're in a tough spot.
Right.
Okay? From what I can see with our budgeting and our expenses and everything, I think we kind of probably fall in the middle. So we do have some things hanging over our head, like the PBA negotiation settlement, where that's going to go. We have other potential costs that are out there where we had insurance money that we have to now refund, or we got insurance money, so we have to refund the state for FEMA funds. So there's obligations that we have out there that we're going to have to meet and still stay within the 2%. Meanwhile, we have potential increases for compensation that are going to be on the table. We have increased costs, fuel, and so on. So all I want to do is really stress to the board that this is real, it's probably happening, and it's going to really make it difficult for us to do anything outside of the 2%. Now, the initial feedback that I got from the board is that the board's not going to do 2% cap legislation to override the cap. So you're essentially saying we're going to stay within the 2%. Now, based on that, looking at the budget, we have a lot of things we have to focus on. We started with the board's decision to cut overtime, okay, and make sure that that's under better control. There's definite savings over with that. There are other opportunities for savings. Some of them relate to individual issues that we'll talk about in executive session because it's of that nature, that has opportunities to put money back into the coffers. There are other things like I mentioned with rates, water rates, okay? Water rates, I believe, were increased 2 or 3 years ago. You have to factor in that your costs are going up at least 1 to 2% a year. So if you skip 2 or 3 years on your water rates, it's very hard to go in with a 6% increase of water rates, okay? if you stay on an annual basis for the cost of living, you will be much better off as far as paying for the cost of those departments. Now, you do have a benefit that with the agreement with the town, more hookups, more volume, more revenue. Okay, depending on how many hookups, how much water usage, that will help handle your fixed costs. Okay, but still, water rates I think are very important and have to be at a minimum discussed. I think it's going to be very difficult to implement anything during a budget process, but I think there should be some concrete decisions as to what to do going forward, because the water department needs the funding. And your main sources are your other government sources and your metered sales. That's your main revenue. So if you don't do anything with that, you're going to continue to keep that, like, fund balance is almost non-existent, okay? All right, so we go, that's year one, okay? Year two, it gets better. In order for homeowners to get the tax credit in the second year, school districts and local governments must continue to stay within the tax cap and must develop a plan for sharing or consolidating services. Mayor, I want to credit you and the board for being kind of already ahead of this, because the discussion of consolidated services were happening a long time ago, well before this came out. Well, the state's become very serious, and they're basically saying that local governments that do not work on plans to share and consolidate services will not be eligible for this tax rebate, meaning the residents will not be eligible for the tax rebate in year two. Okay? So that, and again, some municipalities are upset because they're already doing some of this stuff, but that doesn't count. So what they did last year or the year before, they can't credit it toward the next, the 2-year point. So the consolidation efforts are not only nice to have, but they're going to be have to have in year two.
Does it say for those that are already consolidated? Like those towns that did it 5 years ago, are they out of it, or?
No, you have to demonstrate that you are doing something in a consolidated way that is material, okay? It can't be like, a small, a small item. It has to show that you're truly focused on shared services, not the solution. They're not, even though the state wants to, if you listen to some of their information, they want to dissolve, they want to have as much dissolution as possible, because their whole opinion is there's way too much stratified government. But consolidation is absolutely being pushed. There is funding. I think they said something like there was $39 million available for some basic startup for consolidation, and very little of it was used. Nobody wants to use it. So now they're trying to induce it. Okay? So these two things are going to be imperative and basically are going to constrain the board to have to be within the 2%.
If we don't say that, if we say we're gonna comply with the 2%, now that the deadline is passed of assuming, and we don't comply, is there any kind of penalty there?
Well, you have to do legislation to go outside of the tax cap, and there is a deadline for that.
No, I know, but if we had planned, that passed, right, that deadline?
No, I believe it's coming up. You're gonna, I'd have to check. Do you know the absolute drop dead date?
No.
It's not happened yet,
You're talking
but you
about
would have to.
consolidation.
No, just the budget itself. We're doing our budget, and our next budget takes place after we vote on the budget, and if we say we're gonna live within a 2% tax cap.
You have to do that now.
I know, but let's say we assume that we are and we can't comply.
You're gonna have to cut stuff.
Okay.
Because if you don't do the legislation, then you essentially are saying that you're gonna stay within the 2% guidelines. And for you to have a valid budget, now, I don't know how it would be litigated. I guess if you went in and said, will the Office of State Comptroller, come down and say, I don't know. I don't know who's tested it. Be interested in the conversation. But I think the problem is last year maybe you could have tested it. This year you can't, because the potential rebate is a huge issue.
Okay.
That if homeowners aren't eligible for those rebates because of that, you have different problems.
Okay.
okay?
I apologize, I hope I'm not asking for information that you
That's okay, go ahead.
while I was out. But I can sort of see why the officials down at the Association of Towns are getting upset. What is this about, you know, the measurements in order to qualify, that your consolidation has to amount to at least 1% of the participating entity's tax levy in the year following the second year of the credit?
Yes. Yeah, they basically, you take a calculation of, I believe it would be the aggregate cost of both entities at 1%. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying to the mayor. It can't be like dog control, like there's 2 dog control departments, village and town, and you say, okay, we'll consolidate dog control. Net savings is $5,000. That won't hit the 1% aggregate. So what they put that in to prevent you from gaming, I guess in their opinion, gaming the system, gaming the plan. Because, you know, ultimately, and I give them credit because a lot of times they don't think this far ahead. And a lot of municipalities would sit there and say, what's the lowest hanging fruit that we can consolidate, and let's just do it so we qualify.
But they're not saying that we actually have to do it in that time
You
frame,
have to
they're
have a
saying it's a plan.
You have to have a plan that is reasonably constructed.
But it looks also like if you don't actually achieve those savings, do you have to return certain amounts of tax or state aid?
Well, it says basically here that you would be potentially have to return, recapture state aid or to the local government or school district. So I guess they have some formula, and obviously it's not included in here because this still is a working document, okay? But that that would be their penalty, that if you put this plan together and then did nothing, then they would be able to claw back funding. Not necessarily the rebate, because the rebate's already in the homeowner, and obviously the state doesn't want to upset the homeowner. What they'll do is they'll find aid, I don't know, CHIPS money, certain money that might be out there that came from the state, maybe they would be able to claw it back. But they don't specify. And I think that the way they're structuring this, it's going to be very difficult to go around it without consequences, both financial and political. Meanwhile, the mandates to the towns and local governments, there's no discussion about those. The counties have been given a little bit of relief when it comes to, I think, the Medicare, or the Medicaid. But other than that, they're really, the mandate part of this is very, it's kind of off the page. And that was some of the argument by the town supervisors and village mayors and assorted people at the meeting. They were basically saying that you're holding us hostage because a homeowner is not going to blame the state for a problem, they're going to blame the local government. Meanwhile, local government's not getting any relief on some of their activities that they have to do. So this came from GFOA. This is their basic understanding of the potential law as it is right now. The budget director gave me the impression that they're not necessarily backing down from this. This is probably more likely than not, it will become the law. And then we're going to have to work within that construct.
Well, it was in the spotlight during the State of the State address with the governor, so I don't think he's going to back off of it.
Exactly. And, you know, they're doing what they call dog and pony show to listen to people, but I just didn't get the sense that they're going to do anything to really tailor this very much.
Well, if you succeed, it's beneficial, but it is onerous. If all of your good intentions don't amount to what they are demanding.
That's right. So this is something that we're going to have to factor into our discussions. Please read it, and if there's any other questions, you can let me know. There is some good information out there, and the general consensus is that GFOA and the Association of Towns leadership are also against it. So there's definite negative response to all that. Okay. All right. I'll just try to proceed slowly here from there. Okay, so next is item 4, Nugent and Hausler. Our audits came back for 2013. Everybody, all board members were given a copy. I really don't expect you to go through with a fine-tooth comb on it. You know, I'm kind of doing that to some degree, but this all had to do with what we did with the AUD and also with our review of end-of-the-year activity. What I did want to do is have you focus specifically on the management notes page that came with the document, okay? And I first want to ask the board, a lot of times management notes are somewhat proprietary is in that. It can be publicly disseminated, but it really requires your okay to do that. The auditors specifically state in there that the audit findings and a lot of the conclusions are solely for the use of the mayor and the village board. I don't know to what degree this is public knowledge. I'm assuming that at some point it would be, but I can reserve this discussion for executive session because it would qualify, or if you're comfortable with its contents, we can just briefly discuss it now. I'll leave that up to you. Do you have it with you?
I have it downstairs.
Here, I'll let you read, just read the bottom paragraph. The bottom paragraph just basically states the particulars. Again, there's nothing in here that is, I think, earth-shattering, but there are some certain comments about the village activity that I think probably you can discuss in executive session for its particulars, and then it can be public. But the auditors always put that down as a declaration because they don't want this to become misunderstood.
Yes.
Okay, executive session? Okay, so we'll pick that up in executive session then.
Thank you.
Okay. Finally, with the management notes, when you thumb through this, a lot of it is, you know, kind of dry and so on. But one of the things that you can pick up out of here is your GASB 45 liabilities and so on. A lot of the liabilities came out of the other firm that we hired to do the actual GASB 45 that talked about our obligations long-term, retirement benefits and so on. That's, I think, one of the big takeaways is that we have long-term liabilities that are somewhat eye-popping, and that largely has to do with retiree benefits and long-term expenses related to that. On the whole, the health of the village is reasonably okay based on this report. You know, a lot of the stuff is being done accurately, and we have overall fund balances and all the things that they're looking for. I'll discuss more in depth also the state's fiscal stress monitoring that they got back with us. The main thing with that is that they have no declaration about our activity. So what that means is no declaration is that we don't fall under the high threshold of extreme fiscal stress. No declaration doesn't give us a actual position. It just says that we're not one of the top problem children in the state as far as financial considerations. Okay? So that's our Nugent and Hausler management. Okay. Current budget document review and format. I wanted to take a look at our current budget, and I want to highlight a couple things in there that I'd like the board to keep in mind. Some of it I'm going to gloss over because I've talked about a couple of these items in our general discussion here. But we've all been given a document of the current budget, and in the current budget, we have a working copy. And if we look, and I'm doing this for just a general purpose of establishing a baseline, so we're all on the same page as far as our budget structure. Because again, I know we have, Trustee Farina's new. Trustee Murphy, I know that you've been involved in budgeting and so on, so maybe you're more comfortable with it. You know, the mayor's a little more comfortable with it. I know Bob, being doing this for a while, is comfortable. So I just want to quickly touch on a couple things, because as we start to put the budget together, understanding where things are falling will help you be able to understand how we're breaking out the revenues and expenses, okay? So obviously, first page there is going to be a general breakout of appropriations, what the estimated revenues are, our totals. If you see, we're basically, for budget purposes, we're broken down into three main areas: general, water, sewer, okay? Our general is our biggest appropriation. Our water is about 75% of our sewer. Okay? As I mentioned with water, we'll get to water, the revenues for water are limited, and that's why we gotta talk about water rates. Okay, page 1 of 2, so go to the next page and we talk about account codes, okay, revenues. If you look, our primary source of revenues, all right, is real property taxes and sales taxes. Okay, the bulk of our budget is coming from those two main areas. We have a lot of other noise, little things here and there. I do want to point out to some things that I'd like the board to seriously consider as far as expectations. The first one would be looking at our, let's see, where's the fines and forfeited bail, okay? I think we should ask the new hired prosecutor as to maybe some expectations of what we can expect from there for revenue. Okay, our police chief basically has put in a proposal for a meter person. Okay, a regular staff meter person to issue tickets and collect fines. We need to make sure that the expectation as to how much money is being expended for that is going to match up with what our expectation for the parking meters are going to be. So we're going to need to highlight that as far as what our revenue number is going to be there. Okay. A lot of the other items are ones that are somewhat fixed: gross receipts, franchise fees, special property assessments. That stuff is going to be largely in the window. It's very difficult for us to really induce any additional revenues from those areas because they're mainly a function of basic regular activities. You know, we're not going to be able to go out there and sign up 1,000 more cable customers to be able to get the franchise fees from there, or with our utilities, same thing. Okay, so those are going to be more limited. So the realities are sales tax. And our court/meter money are some of our best opportunities to get additional funding and fees for doing specific things for the public, like rehooking up of water, making sure that we have proper escrows set up so that we don't have applicants burning through escrows and then we're chasing after them using manpower to try to get the escrows moved up, okay? So those are some opportunities on the revenue side. Mortgage tax, we're pretty, I'm now on page 2 of 2 of revenues. Mortgage tax is also a function of the economy and how many people are out there. Consolidated highway, which is CHIPS money, is pretty much standard in that area. And then if you notice, a lot of the other areas are zeros. There's not a whole lot of stuff there that would be substantial as far as revenues.
Do you think we can anticipate that much in chips?
If you look over the years, it's been pretty steady. $25,000.
I thought it was more than that years ago. I mean,
2011,
years
2000,
ago,
yeah.
it was huge.
Yeah, years. No, I'm talking about the last 2, 3
double
years.
that,
Yeah, last 2, 3 years, it's been tracking in that area.
Okay.
Okay. Again, the state and the federal government are largely not contributing to.
Is there any way that we can affect getting more CHIPS money, or is it just a straight?
I'm not familiar with the exact schedule that they use as to determine that. I think it's a function of your mileage of roads or something like that. I think that's how they determine your CHIPS aid, is how many miles of roads you have. I asked this question of the auditors a couple of years ago because I was curious about how they were really determining that money, and I'm pretty sure that's what they told me, miles of roads.
That's what, yeah, correct?
Yeah. So So that's something that, again,
There's nothing we
we
can do.
can't build any more roads because it costs us more than anything we'll get in CHIPS money, so. Okay, so that's our revenue side, okay? Now we're going into appropriations and/or expenses, okay? One other thing I want to mention on the codes, when you look at the account codes for revenues, just understand that if you ever want to get information out of the system, it starts with 4 zeros dot and then that code. Okay, sometimes it gets a little confusing when you're trying to get data out of the system. Got to remember that you got revenue and appropriations. The reason why I'm saying that is as we get more into the KBS world, those basic understandings are going to be important. Okay. All right. So now we go into the general fund, and again we have our general fund, which is our A. We have our F for water, and we have our J. Again, a lot of this stuff is going to be subject to the initial information that we put forward. That's going to be the requested amount. And then once we add all of that up, we'll have a better baseline as to what we're looking at as far as needs for appropriations. I want to highlight just some of the areas that I think there are some discussion items. Okay, one of them is village attorney. And I'm gonna skip because I wanted village board comment first, but I'm going to skip and throw in a couple items as we go through this that are of my interest and priority, and then just something to chew on while we're going through this. Okay, so when we go to page 2 of 9, we go to village attorney. Right now we have earmarked $40,000. One of the things that I think would be an important consideration, I'm a big believer that it's important to have resident experts around periodically to help guide, help induce certain things to happen. I've talked about certain things related to workers' compensation. A lot of that stuff can be driven by the attorney who understands workers' compensation and how to solve some of those problems, okay? Without getting into details, we have certain opportunities that I observe during board meetings that it would be good to have the village attorney present. Whether or not that means having them one meeting a month, and working on an agreement. Now, the town has a town attorney at every meeting, okay? If I remember right, I believe the town was paying approximately $50,000 annually for full legal support across the board.
In the board meetings?
Including board meetings. There was a cap. Basically, there was a certain number of guaranteed hours, and then any hours over that were not charged. They were part of normal and customary business
What about
dealings.
special projects and stuff you said?
Special projects like the Fort Montgomery water project, that was outside of that. But with the settlement master, you had matching funds or certain ratios that get built up. The reason why I'm saying this is that the village hasn't appointed an attorney per se. You're using Jacobowitz and Gubitz right now, but it's not in an appointment role. There are opportunities, I think, where the village attorney, upon hearing certain things, can give some guidance to the board that might streamline your decision-making and maybe save you money. Okay? I saw it at the town level. I'm kind of a big believer in it. You don't need to go all in and say, all right, let's increase this budget to $55,000. We have a full-time attorney that's here at every meeting. But I do think that you will get some guidance that might pay for that just in a good decision, in a good recommendation that you guys act upon. And I'll elaborate that when we talk about the individual issues that I think are pertinent to what I'm aiming at here with the attorney, okay? But a lot of times, and I give a lot of credit to Gina because she tries to answer as much as she can, but she's not an attorney, and I don't think she wants to try to be one. So she'll give you the best guess or best recommendation that she can. I will also, but there's a lot of cases where it's out of our realm, and we really think that somebody who has the background with that can give a better answer. And if you make that a decision, it could save you $10,000. I've seen it happen. I would recommend you at least consider it. Okay? Okay. Engineering. I think very importantly, you don't necessarily need an engineer on a regular basis, But you do need to quantify your engineering costs to make sure you recognize that when you have $20,000 here, those aren't all your engineering costs. Your capital fund has engineering costs. And to some degree, your capital fund has a lot of engineering costs that probably aren't known. There's a lot of activity that's gone on over the years. Well over $100,000 has been spent in engineering. Now, you don't necessarily feel it because it's not necessarily a budgetary issue. It's more from the money you borrowed that went to pay for that. But I do think having a better quantitative understanding of your engineering costs will play a role. You know, yesterday there was a discussion about the hazard mitigation plan. That's a specialty. Is the firm that you're considering a specialist in doing that? Will it cost you more to use a non-specialist versus somebody who does it on a regular basis that can do it in half the time?
Well, I think one of the reasons why we entertained Fulchetti again was the fact that he did it, and we thought maybe if he had one in place already, there would just be a short hop to getting it renewed, but from what I understand, it's a start from scratch process now, so.
Which to me is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't understand that, but it is what it is.
But making that statement that it's a specialty, again, I'm all for, loyalty is key for me, but the bottom line is, we have to be loyal to our taxpayers first.
Then we get a price on somebody to do it.
I agree, I think on something like that, and just like we were talking about with the, with 109, where Fulchetti, John Hager was saying that though we call our engineer, he calls another engineer because that's not their field. So now not only are we covering their costs, but the extra piece that Fulchetti puts on.
You pay the markup.
So that's something that I agree.
We
need to.
have to entertain looking into a
I
new one
agree.
who can accommodate our needs at this point in time, because.
But again, that's gotta be something that if we are gonna make that decision, it's gotta be done semi-immediately, because
Well, no.
all we have to do is tell John Fulchetti a week from now, he's like, I'm halfway through it already, I'm gonna have to charge you,
Yeah,
where we know he hasn't started yet.
yeah.
So if we do farm it out and someone says, no, I can do it for $4,000, and we go back to John and say, we can get it done for $4,000, John, can you? If not, we're gonna give it to this guy, it's gonna cost us $8,000, and we give you $10,000 last time, and you're telling us all you have to do, you're still gonna tweak it. I don't care what you say about, I have to redo everything, you're tweaking it, you have the framework, you're changing stuff, it is gonna take you time, but in no way is gonna take you the time it took you to put it
Initial
together.
one, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, again, when you look in 2011, 2012, almost $55,000 were expended, and then it was budgeted for 20. I don't necessarily understand any of that, maybe, you know, whoever was here.
I'm sorry, run that by you?
If you look, under engineer,
Right.
$55,000 approximately was spent 11, 12.
Okay,
And then in 12, 13, only 20,000 was budgeted. Now, obviously, it doesn't show us what was expended there. But
Right.
that's just a big change.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, if that change is because we didn't have as many projects going on or whatever, then I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. We did have a lot of projects going on, but a lot of those projects were capital fund projects, which is a
Right.
different bucket of money.
right.
So, I would just like the board to consider this very carefully as to, number one, how much to budget for this, and number two, making sure that we try to use specialists, okay, instead of generalists when it comes to certain things, because I think you save money in the long run because it's less hours to get it done. Okay, I'd rather, if whether it's Fulchetti or Fusco or Lejudas or McGooey-Hauser, whoever does it, I'd rather them come in and say, okay, hazard mitigation, $5,000, that's the cost total. Instead of, well, it's $180 an hour, and I think it's gonna be this many hours. And then you have basically a never-ending expense that could be a backbreaker. Okay, so when it comes to engineers, attorneys, financial advice, any of that kind of stuff, just have a plan, okay, on what you're trying to do. Okay, insurance, okay? Insurance is expected to go up for a couple reasons. One, we received well over, I want to, top of my head, well over $300-something in insurance proceeds. Gina, am I pretty correct? $360,000 for last year, okay? our policy is gonna be affected by that. Okay, now, it would have been nice if FEMA would have paid everything right out, and then we wouldn't have had to go to insurance, but that's not how it worked out. So, CLG has requested to meet next month with us to determine our insurance quote. Expect that to go up. The only alternatives that I would say with insurance that we can do going forward is that try to get some value added out of our insurance support, okay? One of the things that I noticed with some other towns and villages is that they get a lot of evaluation support of their policies. Instead of the insurance broker just coming in and saying, okay, here's a little booklet, this is how much this is, this is how much this is, so that you're in compliance with the reorganization rules when you start a new term, they actually go in there and say, look, you have a pretty high experience rating, let me look at your policy as to how you handle certain things. Kind of like what our auditors came in and said, can I take a look at your purchasing policy? Okay, well, we pulled out the purchasing policy, and if I remember right, it was dated 1996. A little embarrassing when we're being evaluated for how we spend money and our purchasing policy is so old. But they're asking the questions, and I think the insurance companies, our broker, should be doing the same thing. Have all of your departments done the proper training? Workers' compensation pays attention to that stuff, okay? Has everybody been trained? Bloodborne pathogens, proper work rules, safety glasses, all this other stuff. They have these type of things. Are we, number one, is it being offered to us? Number two, are we taking advantage of it? Okay, so expect insurance to be something that's going to be on the plus side of this number, okay? And we're gonna have to make up for it through other ways. Contingency funds, I talked about contingency funds. My preference is with budgeting to try to be heavily on contingency, less on your normal expenditure, so that you guys have more control over those decisions when that money, let's say, so-called is needed. A good example now is your snow fund. Technically, it's kind of a contingency fund. If you had your snow salaries and overtime and everything built in to your regular employee salaries, it'd be really much more difficult to determine what's actually day-to-day business, what's above and beyond because of the difficult winter we're having. So contingencies, I think, it would be good to go into a direction of trying to maybe beef those up at the expense of some of the other line items that are salary department specific. Page 4, one of your largest expenses as far as salaries is your police department and all its related activities. Obviously, the public wants to have police protection to the best of the ability. The real issue here is are we efficient with the use of our police dollars? I have some ideas. I have some things that I have mentioned to a couple board members that I think would be useful in maybe trying to control our costs here a little bit better. If we look at some of the other stuff, the fire department, obviously, they're going to propose a budget. Charlie, you're going to be obviously an advocate of whatever comes forward. That again is an opportunity. The only thing I would say is just cost justification. That's the main thing you're looking for.
Oh, just a reminder though, we were going to put in an operations budget, a new line under fire to cover.
You mean a new code for?
Yeah, things like painting the truck room, light bulbs, things that are, well, they're
not part of the fire department, they're part of the village.
Yeah,
The
our
village is responsible.
Oh,
for
that's
it.
right,
Yeah.
the truck room right there.
Mhm.
Okay, so truck, yeah, we'll note
It's in
that
the
down
lease.
about that.
It's
in the
part
lease.
of the,
Right.
the lease agreement.
So we're gonna add that, we'll take a look, I think wherever we're paying the lease payments out of, we could probably just make sure we budget for those additional costs that you're referring to.
Yeah, you had talked about adding an actual.
We can, but if there's already a line there that covers that,
What, is it the truck room you're talking about, or just the?
Well, in the contract, it says that the village is responsible for painting and among other things, light bulbs. And,
Have we been taking care of that?
Yeah.
we did this past year.
that's what it came up,
Yeah.
that's when it came up.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll take a look and see if that's the way to do it, if to break it out, or to just include it together. I guess it's really a board discussion thing. The codes do specifically say.
When they address the truck room rent, maybe you can amend that line to cover, I mean, that isn't a very large
No.
expense.
I definitely want to, I would like to see it in a separate
Okay,
line, mainly because I don't want it to be just given over. If we're gonna be spending it on a taxpayer's dollar, obviously when the bulb goes out, you replace it. But, not that anyone will abuse it, but I don't wanna see the truck room painted 3 times a year.
Well, look, I believe it will allow us to make this, let's say, if you look, 3410.043.
Right.
Okay, I believe we'd be able to do that, I just gotta check to make sure. Typically, the third digit is at the discretion of the municipality. The original codes are standardized across villages, but you can add these point after the 04, which is your contingency funding. So we'll put some potential discussion and put that in as maybe .043. Okay, I'll just write .043 right now for a painting. Do we have an estimate of what?
Well, since it was painted this year, everything except the ceiling, the only thing that might happen would be painting the ceiling.
All right, so why don't we do this, Charlie, because who's gonna be coming to meet us?
Probably the chief.
The chief?
Steve
Oh,
Suarez.
Okay, so Steve Torres,
Suarez.
is his last name? Okay, he took over for John Rush, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm just gonna put down here, have them, we'll use .043 right now, just put it as a .043, and, I think in the contract, what, do you remember what the specific wording states as far as it?
I think it's painting and light bulbs.
Painting and light bulbs, okay,
so
I
what's a
believe
couple
the
hundred bucks
gas also.
top would be?
And
I
gas.
think the gas also, for
Oh.
heating.
gas for heating, okay, so maybe it could be considered like maintenance costs, or, maybe we can term it maintenance.
Rather than operations.
It can be, whatever you guys, look, when you guys do the presentation, when the chief does, he can name it what he wants, and unless it's something outrageous.
Well,
he'll go with
it
operating
was
costs.
our idea, just in terms of tracking costs.
Okay, so
They-
operating, we can name it operating costs.
Ed, last
Mhm.
time, fire department would only give you the .2 and 4s.
Oh, they won't go,
that
they won't
lease-
expand it?
That was put in by the treasurer because it's the lease that we have.
Okay,
So we put that number in based on the negotiations of that lease.
okay.
So the fire chief only brings you the 2s and 4, the .2s.
Just the 2s and 4s,
.4s.
he won't break it down any more than that? Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll do that, I'll take care of it. Okay, operating costs, I'll make it an 043. I'll add that as a line. Okay. All right, so we got our fire department. Next thing is snow removal. Okay, I will say this, the snow removal budget was increased a couple years ago, and it's coming in handy right now. I gave the board yesterday a copy of our current expenditures. I recommend that we're somewhere in this vicinity. We could be a little bit less, but, because again, everything's an estimate. Will the weather next year be as bad as this year? Probably not, but we need to factor it in, okay? So, the estimate there will be something in the vicinity, okay? All right, again, just flipping through here, a lot of other small stuff on page 6. Senior citizens, okay? That's a very high topic of discussion recently, since the senior center was purchased. There used to be money for recreation for senior citizens. I think that this can be changed into senior center or money for senior center. I have to look at the code to see if it has any specific stipulations, but I think if it's related to senior center recreation, senior citizen recreation, well, the senior center is basically that. So,
That's where I'd like to see even several of these these items that are unfunded, where if we're gonna do anything with that, my goal would be to follow the majority of other towns, and that is, majority is eventually be put under recreation. So if we're gonna code it, let's put it towards that, and then eventually get it under rec, because right now, there is no real person that's overseeing this and the distribution of the money. So that's why they put it under rec to begin with, so they have a salaried employee that's looking over that. But I agree with 100%, definitely not senior citizens. If we're putting any money into it, it's senior center.
Yeah, and again, I'll check to see if there's any stipulations, but otherwise we can repurpose that for the senior center specific. Again, on this page, a lot of the other stuff has no funding because we don't have a CD administrator anymore, and so on. All right, so we go to page 8, and we start to talk about all of our benefit costs. Expect state retirement, police and fire to go up. We did get low SAP estimates for the fire department, so coming in around 37,000, so we'll probably put that about 40, just to give ourselves a little flexibility, because we've had some tough experience with subsequent years for police and fire having to take out a contingency to pay for the increased amounts. Okay, so I think that we shouldn't shortchange any of that, because we could find ourselves having to do budget transfers to pay for it. Health insurance. Health insurance is a big thing, because right now, with NISHIP, we have a relative amount that we know we're gonna have to pay with the renewal. The board is actively engaged in a discussion with Marshall and Sterling on their plan. There is savings in that option, but now's not the time to make that decision per se budgetarily wise, because you haven't gotten complete discussion and finished everything you have to do as far as talking with everybody and getting buy-in and so on. I don't know where that is in relation to the board's position on it. So I recommend that we budget health insurance under NISHIP criteria.
Without question.
I agree.
Okay, and if it's determined that we go with a new carrier, you'll find some savings in the year, which will obviously be beneficial.
We'll say spend it on the grievances.
Right.
We'll follow it.
Okay. Bond schedules, I'll be working on the bond schedules to get the updated principal and interest payments that are coming up. As I mentioned, one of the things that we're going to try to do is to get our maturity dates for our bond anticipation notes to be around the same date, so that we have one transaction or a couple transactions all around the same time. There are on here, the only additional bond payment is going to be that bond that that you guys approved in April. That was the proceeds were gained now in this fiscal year, and they're going to become an obligation based on the amortization schedule there, and that'll be included in here. The status of some of the other bonds, like I said, are going to be reviewed and then inputted. I did talk about putting reserves as far as equipment and so on in a budget. They're done. I'm not going to say it's not done, but it's a very difficult way to make sure that you're going to get that money for that purpose, because there's no restrictions when you do it this way. If you guys decide to take that $20,000 that's listed here for equipment reserve and spend it on something else, that's where it's going. You actually have to establish bona fide reserve funds by legislation, meaning the board will do, in some cases it requires a public hearing, to create these reserve funds, and that's something in the new fiscal year can be done if you choose to. Okay, you would have to budget for them in this fiscal year,
Right.
and then start them up for next fiscal year. Okay, all right, going to water. Again, for water, you've got your account codes are with F. Okay, if you look, there are two main sources of revenue: your metered sales and your water rents to other government. Now, your water rents to other government is your town water. Okay, that should go up. okay? Because you're getting more people hooking up there. So that number and that revenue level should go up. But still, at the end of the day, your revenues are about $750,000, but take a look at your fund balance. Essentially zero for budget purposes.
Right.
Now, the reality is that there is some fund balance there, because it is an estimate, but it's nothing substantial, okay? So my recommendation is that instead of waiting 2-3 years and then increase your water rates, if you did it every year, kind of like what's going on with the reval over in, with the town, where every year the reval is being re-reviewed, you don't have the shock. You don't have the shock factor where people are being hit with large increases because it wasn't done in previous years. The other thing that I've seen with your water is the delineation between residential and apartments and commercial. Okay, you're essentially charging the same rate for any of those entities. I think you'll find that in the majority of villages and towns and cities and so on, that your residences, your commercial, your apartments have different schedules because of their, number one, their usage, number two, economies of scale, as far as if they're using a lot of water, but they're already paying their share of the fixed costs, their per gallon charge, let's say, would be less. But maybe they have a flat fee because they're a commercial entity to guarantee that you have a revenue stream, and then give a discount when there's higher volume of usage. Okay, this is something that you're not going to be able to do between now and the beginning of the year, but I recommend that you seriously consider water rates.
Commercial rate?
Yes, a commercial rate, maybe a flat fee, front-end flat fee for commercial and apartments. Okay, now I did ask Kevin if there was did he have additional use, like was his time required more from apartments to commercial or versus residential? And he didn't necessarily feel one way or another on it. He was gonna kind of get back to me and give me an idea of maybe is there more need for one or the other. I think, though, any way you slice it, if you use a lot more gallonage, you probably should get some type of cheaper rate after a certain amount. But if you're a commercial entity, maybe a flat fee should be part of that. So even if you use 0 gallons, you still have a flat fee. Kind of the way utilities do it, whether you use a kilowatt of electricity, you're still paying a basic service charge of $15 or whatever. But you're gonna have to find ways.
Don't we have a minimum?
You do, but there's
That's
water
for
with
residents,
that.
yeah.
Okay, you have 8880 is your flat first tier. That's 0 to 5,000 gallons. But maybe commercial and apartments should have a flat rate just by the support side of it, the water department. Commercial, it's $100 flat rate every 6 months, and then we give you a discount on your water usage from there. So technically, if you used a lot of water, you might actually pay less than you're paying right now. Okay, apartments are another example. Okay, your water usage at apartments tends to be higher. Okay, how much manpower goes into maintaining or supporting those apartments?
Well, the bigger meter is substantially more also
For costs.
for the actual expense, yeah.
Yeah. So your revenue piece for water is really important. It's not the only reason why you have to borrow money from the sewer fund to pay for payroll. Well, you collect your water revenues in May and November, and May is right before the end of the fiscal year. So when you go into the new fiscal year, you have a lot of money in the water fund, but about next month, you start to sweat it because you don't have as much
Right.
revenue. Okay, so I think water needs to be a good discussion. We can continue on with that discussion going forward. Remember, if the state's basically saying that it's 2% tax cap, then they're admitting that you're probably gonna incur 1.5% to 2% of the increased expenses. That applies to your water too, okay? All right, so we go to page 2, there are your appropriations. Now with water, your appropriations are higher because you have more debt. Okay, a lot of work was done, tanks, water meters, which your water meter last payment is this year for $100,000. So you notice that a lot of the expenses outside of your salaries are your debt. Okay, and some of it is quite aged, some of it is more recent. Okay, everybody follow me so far? I just want to make sure we're all on the baseline here. Okay, property taxes, and this is going to require support from school board. The town and the county do not charge the village for Bog Meadow. Okay, they do not charge the village, they waive the property taxes, the school district does not. The school district charges for property taxes for Bog Meadow. Now, there was reach out already to the school, a couple members of the school board. They have said that they are going to discuss the issue and try to get some, maybe some closure to it. But this year you budgeted, or last year's budget, which is this year's active budget, was budgeting $32,000. We paid $37,000 in taxes. $37,000 in costs on a $750,000 budget is a lot of money.
32 or 37?
37.
You know, we revisit this every once in a while. I remember talking about this years ago, and I don't remember how we looked into, I guess the results for it. We didn't. Do you remember that, Gina? Does this come up every year?
Yes.
And somebody must reach out to the school, and I don't remember.
There's been no, we talk about it, but no real reach out. I think that, and not in a negative way, I think more than one of us, I think several should go up.
Yeah.
And not necessarily confront them in a meeting. I think we should set a meeting with Pat Cahill,
absolutely.
the superintendent, the whole nine, sit down for a few minutes and just talk about the basic,
Concept of.
there's a reason that we're not paying taxes to the town and the county. And you shouldn't be budgeting for that extra 32,000 on your budget. It's, it's a fact, and as long as we can bring the facts and show it, I'd rather not do it at a meeting where it's more confrontational. I'd rather do it at a regular sit-down.
Sure, I don't know whether anybody.
But let's not wait, let's talk,
Money, yeah.
let's schedule it, whoever wants to go, I'll schedule for next week, done. We'll put it on the calendar. All right, whoever wants to go, get with me, best time. Obviously, it's gonna need to be during the day when they're all there. And I'll see if a couple of board members can make it during the day. If not,
Exactly right, that was-
we'll do it at night, okay?
Yeah, just remember, here's one of the arguments that I would make, and that is that $37,000 on a $750,000 budget, okay, is 5%. Okay, $37,000 on a $27 million budget, it's a lot less of an issue.
Right.
Okay, so I think it's a very salient argument, and I think that it's one that has precedence. You have the county and the town, and the town's agreement dates back to the 90s, if I recall. Okay, but for the water department, this would be a big opportunity to help shore up the revenue to expense issues with the water. Okay.
This comes out of the water, the 32?
This is a water budget, yes, this is coming out of your water fund. Okay, so 5% of your water expenditures or appropriations are going to pay a tax, okay, for a water source,
Well, that's even more,
which some of the schools benefit from.
right, well, that's even more, because we, not only did we just hook up for the Fort Montgomery School, but, when you talk about, I just totally lost my train of thought. I'm gonna let it go.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, no, when you talk about the fact that, it's the water and our transfers to the water sewer, that would actually help us a lot with basically maintaining our balances. That should come into discussion and be part of the big picture. Not just the fact that, well, these two do it, so you should. That 32,000 is a big reason why we have to constantly go back to and transfer between water and sewer to try to average it out. If we didn't have that,
That may be the difference, yeah.
we might be able to balance our books. And again, we're all in the same boat. Where should it go? It's all the same taxpayers. If we were able to do it on our end, our books would be much more cleaner and much easier, and we're not transferring, and again, it's more transparency to the community.
Yeah, and again, municipalities and or schools taxing other municipalities is just foreign. It's kind of a strange thing. And
Not unlike the MTA tax.
you got it.
Yeah.
That's right. It just doesn't feel right.
Right.
Okay. All right. So now we're at sewer. Okay, we're talking sewer revenues. Tale of two cities with the sewer department. I would like to ask the sewer department head if he might be able to help glean, because right now our budget was 981 and change for revenues, and our actuals were about 100,000 higher. Okay, so our actual receipts are 1.086 million. Our interest and penalty number is higher. Okay, we budgeted 20,000, we're bringing in 23.5. And again, the collections happened on June and December.
Is that because we weren't counting on what was coming from Fort Montgomery?
They're not sewer.
That seems, and it's relatively
Oh,
small.
that's true, yeah.
You know, you do have, like businesses that
Two or
are in
three, yeah,
special
that's it, right.
districts that are maybe participating, but you are, your revenue levels for sewer are better. So, you know, this might, and again, to change sewer rates, you need to do a public hearing and so on. I'm not advocating changing sewer rates right now based on some of the numbers I'm seeing here. But, oh, by the way, you change your water rates, it will
Right.
impact your sewer
Impacts
rates.
the
So
sewer
it
rate.
really doesn't, you don't really have to do anything with that.
No.
I'm just wanting to highlight that on the revenue side, you're above plan. And on a $1 million budget, $100,000 is 10%. That's a nice,
No.
it makes it a little bit easier, okay, to manage that.
That's probably why we went there for the revenue in the first place. Huh?
Okay. All right, so now we're at sewer fund appropriations. This is where things get a little dicey with some of our accounting, because some of the hurricane stuff that went into where we got FEMA money, and then we got insurance money, and all that was done in the sewer fund, but unfortunately it's traveled over fiscal years. And now we're getting a clawback from FEMA, and we're in a different fiscal year, and the source of the funding is right now under investigation, because we didn't budget for FEMA coming back saying you owe us $60-something thousand. So on the appropriation side, we do have a couple challenges there where we're gonna owe some money. I'm not yet concerned that it's a backbreaker, especially when I see on the revenue side above plan, but it does say that if we anticipate any projects that are going to go over a year, they gotta be capital projects, because the accounting becomes extremely difficult to manage, especially in a case like this. This is almost like a textbook case of why you would use a capital fund, okay? If you look at the rest, state retirement, expect increases. Workers' compensation, we're already under budgeted for workers' comp, and we're having to pay additional monies out of contingencies and so on to take care of it. And again, you have your broken out health insurance. When we look at the sewer department, there were quite a bit of sewer improvements done this year and last year, and those are all now in the schedules. You do see that serial bond 2012. You can see where you went from, I'm looking at G 9710.6066, where you had no money there, and then in 2013, 2014 budget, which is where we're at now, you have a $130,000 payment. Now, again, if I recall, this is a consolidation of debt, so it's not necessarily all new debt,
Right.
but but it is an additional amount of money there that has to be paid. When you look at 2011, 2012 to now, the overall debt amount for the serial bonds is lower. But some of that can be also a function of how the amortization is done for the bond payments. Sometimes it's increasing principal or decreasing principal, increasing interest, decreasing interest. So a lot of them, you know, you have to look into the nuts and bolts of that to determine what the long-term trend's gonna be. And then at the end there, you get your $1 million sewer fund, okay? So that's just a quick rundown, as quick as I could make it. Quick rundown of what we're gonna be looking at when we populate our new budget, coming up with the meetings with the department heads. I've expressed some challenges. I have some more challenges that I'll talk about. But what I want to do now is get some feedback from the board. Because again, this needs to be interactive. I don't want, as a chief fiscal officer, I don't want to just push all the stuff out there and everybody nod, and then when we get into the year, well, why did we do that? And point all the fingers at me.
That's the plan.
So, let's go around, and again, what I'd really like to do is just get any comments that you have, any imperatives, any areas that are very important to you that you'd maybe like additional oversight put into, maybe additional analyzation put into. Mayor, start with yourself.
No, just give me last.
Give you last?
Yeah.
Okay, Charlie?
What will it take for us to come up with a new revenue stream related to perhaps West Point? And we keep talking about recouping the civilian expenditures on post, or getting the 5-star on the property roll since it has been privatized, at least the improvements above ground.
With the lease agreement that they have and so on.
Well, hopefully they haven't gotten the lease agreement that, you know, guarantees them tax freedom for life, but,
Yeah, that I don't know. I did show you that example of the IHG hotels and how they're doing this to a lot of different bases. I think we're gonna probably need some help from either the assessor's office in the town.
they've already written it off.
Why?
I guess they were told that it's not taxable, and apparently no one has really pushed back.
Who makes that decision on
Um,
whether it's taxable or not ultimately?
It's hard to say.
Well, the
because-
history, it's the PAL initiative, privatization of Army lodging,
Right.
and Congress went ahead with this because they thought they could upgrade Army facilities, improve them, and also create a more level playing field between on-post facilities and the outside community. But there was an apparent end run by the privatized, or the companies that took over, with this lend-lease agreement that is done on a post-by-post basis, which I haven't ascertained whether or not it has happened yet with West Point, because we were the last to privatize. But this lend-lease agreement, one of the things in there is, oh, you don't owe any property tax, and it appears to have been done by the Army, not by Congress.
I think that the first step that we need to do, and we need to move quicker on this, is I believe that we need to sit down with Jim Castlin and Colonel Rad first and see if we can get a partnership rather than have to actually come after them. Because when I sat down and I brought up a few of the points, they both were very positive of assisting the community. The problem is exactly what we're talking about with one of the other issues, Bog Meadow. We talk about it every year, we've talked about it 20 times, and I've only had one meeting with them in the 20 times we've talked. So we've got to schedule the meeting, sit down, and get all our pieces on the table of how you can enhance a community that you're concerned about. Your academy is concerned about coming into the town of Highlands, Highland Falls, and you're thinking it's, well, you can actually help us.
Well, maybe we're calling it the wrong thing. maybe calling it a tax, a property tax, is not what we wanna say here.
Oh, payment in lieu of
Yeah.
taxes, negotiated.
You know, because if they got a piece of paper that says we don't pay taxes, maybe we should give them a piece of paper that says, yo, is this, and we'll call something else.
I agree 110%.
You know, I guess it's only how you
A gift.
address that. Yeah, here's your gift.
But again, these two, being our first stop, can also help us forge that. And if they try to say, no, you can't do anything, then we know where we stand. Then we know we have to go the other way. But I believe that they are our allies at this particular time. But we have to, if we don't initiate it, I'll tell you right now, as much as they wanna help, if we don't initiate it,
No,
it's not gonna happen.
That's right.
So that's the bottom line, is that we have to get a meeting with them as soon as possible, but have, like, the two times I met with them, it was only an hour, a lot of material, more generalizations. We've gotta get more specific of what we're looking for, and, General Counsel made a statement of, get our lawyers on it, which made me ecstatic. You mean your lawyers are gonna pay for it? That's fantastic. As long as it's what we're looking for. And again, making it, you're part of our community. That's the whole separation is what's killing us over the last 20 to 30 years. We're told, no, we are Annapolis. You are part of our community. You're not a separate entity. Yes, Fort Montgomery's a separate entity, Highland Falls is a separate entity, and West Point's a separate entity. But we're all the town of Highlands. And if we don't work together, we're not gonna do as well as if we do work together. And so, to answer your question, that to me, and again, now say we meet with the school next week, I have no problem setting another meeting for the following week with a specific agenda, 4 or 5 points, that's it, come in, we talk about it, and then we move. We don't overload them with 20 things. In lieu of taxes, I would like to move forward and talk about the surcharge possibly. I think that's gonna be a serious amount of income for the community, as well as shared services, which has happened with the, I mentioned to several of the board members, I'm told that in Annapolis, in an emergency situation storm, they come out of the academy and they actually assist in the Annapolis community, okay? There's no, you guys say that, oh, we need to be as good as Annapolis. Here's a chance for you can be as good as Annapolis. Come out and help us shovel and do a couple more things. And again, this community will be better off for it, and then you can come to the restaurants because they're gonna be plowed out, and you can come to the air, and half you people that are living here will have a better access back into West Point. So the bottom line is we have to show them why it's beneficial to West Point. For anyone, I mean, as nice of a person as we all are, giving $25 to St. Jude's makes me feel good, but when I'm gonna invest $5,000, I'm really looking for, what's in it for me? And everybody, it's a nature, it's natural. So we have to show West Point why it's beneficial to West Point, because Rideout and General Caslin have no stake in the actual, with a company paying taxes from people from Wisconsin, and that's why they would be in favor. It doesn't hurt West Point, any of these programs. It doesn't hurt West Point. And we do have to have something set up, because more and more privatization's happening. They've already talked about the ski lodge and possibly the golf course, where the ski lodge first, because they're losing more money than the golf course. That's already on the plate to privatize. So we've got to get something in place now, so that as these things privatize, again, when we talk about the 32,000, it's not a lot for a $27 million budget, but it is for $6 million. The money that we would get.
Or 750,000.
Exactly.
In this case.
Right, that's what I'm talking, for them, for these massive companies that are coming in, making $10, $15 million on the laundry and the other privatized businesses, a couple $100,000 isn't gonna kill you.
Yeah. The other thing I would recommend, just so you answer, because a lot of times when you go at that level, they'll say, well, did you work at this at the lower levels? Like, did you get a hold of the Office of Real Property in the county? Did you talk to your local assessor? If the assessor here has said, there's nothing else we can do, get a letter that says that. so that when you go into these meetings and people start to try to push you away by saying, well, why are you coming to us at this level? You should have done it earlier. You already have that part covered. So there's really no way to kind of deflect and push away this issue, because that's typically what happens.
But I wouldn't wait for that. I think it's a case of negotiating a payment in lieu of taxes.
Which the
you know,
county
get it out
did
of
for
the-
Balfour. Okay, the county did that for Balfour.
Here's my question
8
with
years
that.
ago, or whatever the number was.
I know they did it because of the building that went on, but they're still collecting all the rents. Why are they still not paying us?
Well, the argument, my understanding of the argument back then was that a company was coming in, doing, building activity, and the local community and the county were not benefiting from the sales tax side of that, okay? And that was the whole argument, and I guess somehow they came to an agreement that they had in lieu of taxes. Maybe that
In lieu of
same.
sales taxes.
I believe it was sales tax related,
So
correct?
this, again, now, this is where we have to not, because we're closing ourselves, we're our worst enemy. We still need to look to Balfour Beatty then. Balfour Beatty's making a killing on West Point. And, you know, maybe if we can't get Balfour Beatty, we can use them as the, all right, look, we'll let Balfour Beatty go.
But they're a
But everyone
government,
else has to
but they're a
come.
government contract, and the state looks at West Point as a black hole. Realistically, if you took a state rendition of the map, the West Point property would be just a dark picture that's not part of the state to some degree as far as jurisdiction,
Right.
taxing authority, and so on. So maybe getting the information as to the structure of the Balfour Beatty agreement might be also a way to start.
Well,
The biggest
that
thing-
is a different animal though, but at least with, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
At least with South Post, you're looking at a property that was, I think, assessed at $11 million, just coming off the tax rolls. That is clearly within the boundaries of the village.
Right, that's the
So it's a
difference.
little bit of a different animal.
And it's here.
For the property tax angle.
Well, yeah, and the other thing on that property is the whole proposition of turning Spellman into, or a new building again, into some
Cyber Center.
cyber center that's one step removed from the Army, so.
And they're, well, the game plan then, who knows, with funding and everything else, Cyber Center's only gonna be there for about 7 years. Because they're already plans are building some Mahan Hall for the new one, the Cyber Center will be moved. But, I understand, I think that the South Post is our beginning.
Yes,
Because
that'll be easier than
again,
something
I'm
else.
not, for the village, South Post is what we have. But for the town, I realize the state looks at the academy as a black hole. The academy is in the town of Highlands. Pretty much the entire academy. Now, if it was like it was in the 60s, I'd still say it's a black hole and no one touch it. Bottom line is, it's not just an academy anymore, it's a tourist attraction. It's, you've got, where it used to be all government people in there, now you've got private contractors coming in on a regular. That's a huge difference. And if we don't capitalize on this, we'll end up exactly what we did with South Post, where that could have been the Hilton on the Hudson, and we'd be making $20 million on that a year. Okay, we missed an opportunity. We are missing the opportunity on West Point right now, because we're just not asking the question. At least ask the question.
Okay, well, again, that's a good point with revenue, because a lot of the challenge here is finding other sources of revenue. One of the other things I was gonna mention is additional policing. We do get compensation when the football teams come in here and we need policing. If we have activities that go on that requires a police presence that's above and beyond, that maybe should have a fee, okay? I know we talked about some of the recent ongoings with that. Okay, again, sources of revenue, because some of these are not standardized taxpayer expenses. A taxpayer, if somebody holds a private event, why should the taxpayer pay for that policing? Especially if that private event might not even be of a local nature.
Right.
Okay, so those are considerations. So, but I hear your point, Charlie, and I certainly think that that's very worthy of a revenue source for sure. Anything else that out of what we discussed that you feel is pertinent to anything that you whether it's fire department or anything that's under your purview?
Not until we get into.
Nuts and bolts?
specifics, yeah.
Okay, very good. Bob?
I don't know, I like the idea of the commercial accounts, actually, when you think about it, because we do pay additional dollars for water meters to handle larger demands, maybe demand rate and that commercial meter cost would be endured by the customer. The budget done by the department heads, that's gonna be interesting, because you mentioned before that we were gonna try to have them provide us with information rather than saying, give me your numbers. A lot of things have changed in the water and sewer in the last couple of years, sort of, and I just interested to see how that's gonna come about, the numbers coming from the department heads. That to me is, I wanna, yeah, you're right, we should analyze it. We've always taken an approach, this your number, can you cut it? You know,
Yeah.
and
They should activity-based cost their
Yeah,
expenses.
yeah, you're
And
absolutely
what
right.
does it cost you to do what you're doing?
yeah, I wanna know rather than saying, can you cut it 10%?
You got it.
You know, so I think that that's an aspect that we've sort of created what we have over the years by just saying, how
Do it
much-
like you did.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
And that's across, that's not just the budget, that's everything.
yeah,
Well, that's how we've been doing it.
no, I
And
know.
no one's reevaluating the best way. But I think that's happening. I think it's happening more and more.
I think so,
Because we're,
too.
and it's not on the departments, I'm not in any way putting on the departments. If you're there for 15 years and you're doing it that way and no one's saying anything, I must be doing it right. You know,
Well,
and now we're challenging them, now we're saying,
I think, and they're meeting the challenge also.
Yes.
The guys are coming up and saying, well, I did this, I did that. I get emails from people telling me that they did this, and here's a quote on this, and, you know, we never asked before, and we never got it. Now we're asking, and they're being quite responsible, and they're stepping up, and they're doing the things. that
Yeah,
we
they're
do.
they're pushing it to you,
Yes.
so you're
Exactly.
already being briefed ahead of time.
Yes. And-
and the key is that they need to understand that they can ask for help, particularly with the budget. Because this will be the first year, and I don't think they're gonna get it right. They're, as close as they come, we're gonna need to say, here's the extra piece, and next year it'll get better, and next year it'll get better, and they will give us such a much better budget in 2 to 3 years, more on target, and it'll help them get more of what they want.
And you were talking to me before about money in a contingency for
Mhm.
like a particular department,
Mhm.
rather than just in the budget where they can,
Put salary, for a salary line like an overtime contingency.
Yeah.
So, set up, each fund, AFG, have a separate contingency that's to pay your overtime rates. Now, you do have that to some degree in the snow removal,
right,
because when you have snow removal, you're pulling it out of that line. So maybe what you do is that, whatever's budgeted salary-wise is for normal operations. Because again, the public sees the salary schedule, and the salary schedule that they see does not include overtime. So when you look at that salary schedule, you say, okay, this position with this amount of responsibility pays $60,000. That seems reasonable. And then you get the W-2, and it says $90,000. And you're like, wait a second here. Why is it $90,000? And it could be completely justified, but you as the public don't know that. You're just looking at salary schedule saying, oh, great, that's reasonable.
no, that, all these things, and then you add the 45% on top of that, and that $90,000 position becomes,
For the benefits
Yeah.
and fight that.
it becomes quite costly in your labor. The only time you really get a good handle on what we spend is when we sit down and do the budget on labor, and you say, I can't believe we spend that kind of money. And when you talk about that much money in overtime, I had no idea that the overtime was that costly.
Mhm.
You know, we know that there's storms and we know these things, and there's things you have no control over. But it's the schedule overtime that is alarming,
Mm.
you know, and that to me is something that we do have control over.
Yes.
There's not a lot we have control over, but that's one of the things that we can sort of curtail in how we manage this department head.
Give the department head the responsibility to make those discretionary decisions, okay? And utilize overtime for what it's intended for.
Right.
And if you build your salaries factoring in overtime, you're factoring in it as a salary. the differentiation is only by our accounting. It's not by the actual employee, because the employee, and again, no fault of their own, they say, well, last year with overtime, this was my salary. It's human nature to sit there and say, I can't get any lower than this, otherwise I'm taking a cut. Okay, but is it really a cut? Okay, so that's the mindset.
The flip
Exactly.
side too is that you have to ensure that overtime is spread out
Pardon me.
in an equitable fashion, that it's not someone who's preparing to retire, because that also places an ongoing, a forever burden on the
For that
village.
retiree, because of the increased costs for that last year of the income. Yeah, again, at no point am I advocating any discussion about individual salaries. Those were agreed to, they were bargained for, and/or when the hiring happened and the individual increases happened, that's all, that shouldn't be discussed.
That's not what we're talking about.
Not what we're talking about. We're talking about the discretionary amounts that are, in today's times where we're hunting around for revenue, they are extremely material. When you're looking at 10% of your payroll being overtime, okay, at $225,000, that's maybe your tax cap right there, okay? So if you had 0 overtime, you could keep your budget almost the same, okay, and be essentially at flat level, okay? So,
Ed,
yeah,
question. Oh, man.
sure. Mary,
With the overtime, I understand you need to keep your firm on that, absolutely. And we can probably cut it down, for sure. But is overtime cheaper than hiring another person, like you said in the beginning of the meeting? Based on all the benefits and retirement in the long run?
That's a good
That-
question. That's a very
And
good
it's
question.
just something for you guys to digest and think about later on.
And we've been talking about that
Yeah.
too, because, you know, and just, when you have as much overtime as you do, it's telling you something. Maybe we are short-staffed.
Keep the thumb on, for sure.
Yeah.
I understand.
So this is something we really, I've never looked into, because I had no idea that it was as much as it is. But now it's on the front burner, and we'll look and say, you know, maybe we do need a guy, a part-time guy to come in and read the meters on the weekend, or maybe we need somebody as a laborer here to accommodate the needs of a department head instead of doing this task. Maybe we could have somebody who's just coming in as a low-level employee to manage the things that we need done.
An employee with benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Part-time,
Every-
part-time.
If they're
Every
full-time.
time. Well, right, so,
Ah.
right, that's,
But
see,
it's-
now it's part-time.
Right, we're
full-time.
opening,
That's
what
you
it is
guys
we have to
only-
start the discussion.
We got the
If we don't,
discussion
we'll
going
never have
on,
anything.
yeah, that's right, because we wouldn't know unless we started, and now we're starting that,
Perfect.
because it's,
Like I said, I understand keeping your thumb on, for sure,
yeah.
but we should just
Well,
think about what I said. That's-
Another thing we might wanna look into, there might be policies in place that aren't being utilized, like overtime equalization, like maybe just
Exactly.
the top guys are taking all overtime because they're senior.
What Charlie had referred to also.
Right,
Exactly.
so, I mean, we might wanna just look into that, I mean, that's what I was thinking, they do that a lot at our job, that's what happens. Everyone gets cut.
Yeah, but look, again, at the end of the day, I think the main thing is that salaries are understood, agreed upon. It's the overtime that needs to have extra oversight. Doesn't mean you don't run overtime. It doesn't mean that you just say arbitrarily, no overtime because we don't want to spend the money. It's more of, there should be, number one, you have department heads who are charged to make those decisions, okay?